Hey friends, my name's Maddie Wong, and I'm the creative director at Borough Church. Welcome back to another episode of the Borough Church podcast. Each week through the month of July, I am bringing on a different church planter to talk to you about what it means to church plant, how to live sent, and I'm sure we'll talk about the goodness and faithfulness of God. So today, for our episode, I have brought on Chaz Hofler. So Chaz, tell us about yourself, your background, your family. We want to get to know you.
So I'm Chaz Hofler, originally from Brooklyn, New York. Came up in a rough environment that I kind of escaped from, and God, called me back to go back into that same neighborhood, to preach the gospel. And after He changed my life, and so the husband to Marquita Hofler. I have 4 beautiful children. My last 2, my babies are actually twins.
Okay.
And we're just rocking out and just following God's plan and journeying with Him.
Yeah. I love that. Tell me a little bit about your journey to church plant.
So church planting has been, you're right, has been a journey. Yeah. Right? There's been a lot of ups and downs with that. I think initially when God first called me to church plant, it started off with just me knowing what I was called to do. Yeah. And it came with a little bit of reluctance from me and not wanting to do it, but just kept growing in Him. Yeah. And I began to get to a place where I'm like, all right, I'm going to step out into what God is calling me to do. Yeah. And then from the what, I got to see like the where, which was back in my hometown in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah. And that came with reluctance, of course. And, I'm raising a family in Richmond, Virginia. And we finally got to a place, my wife and I, my wife has always been on board with this. And when I met her, she was helping a church plant. Oh, okay. In Virginia. Actually, I was helping a church plant in Virginia as well. We were helping 2 separate church plants in Virginia. So that's like, we had like a parallel path. Yeah. Cool. Our history, our background is in helping church plants. And it's funny because that's what God has called us to do. Yeah. And so we got married. We went through a season of being a little reluctant towards it. Yeah. And then we got to a place where we're like, yo, let's step out. Let's not wait. And let's not wait until we're old and wonder what could have happened, what would have happened if we had obeyed God. And we stepped out into it, and God has been faithful. And it's been 3 years now of seeing God's faithfulness in church planting. Yeah. But I know that you didn't, you had a career before church planting. So what was that? And what were you pursuing? So I've always been an entrepreneur. Okay. I still have a Christian clothing brand. Cool. It's called Dream Alive University. Awesome. I also, I was a Christian rapper. Yeah. I still rap. I'm sure you still do. Yeah. Yeah. I don't do it as much these days because, I'm planting a church. Right. And pastoring God's people, and I don't have a lot of time, to put into it. But I get it in when I can. But the clothing brand is still alive. It's very much alive. Yeah. We're still working on that and pushing T-shirts, sweatshirts, and things like that. Cool. So that's awesome. We'll link it below for you guys to check that out. Okay, so you said that you grew up in Brooklyn. What was it like to grow up in Brooklyn? And maybe tell us a little bit about that. Okay. And maybe, because you also said you're reluctant to go back to Brooklyn. Yeah. And so, walk me through that. So I came up in a neighborhood called Bedford-Stuyvesant. Okay. We call it Bed-Stuy for short. Okay. For those who are kind of like inclined to like the hip hop scene, like this is where like Jay-Z is from. This is where Biggie Smalls is from. Cool. And I came up in that neighborhood, and it was very, very rough, like growing up. And I was a part of some of the stuff that were rough, coming up in Bed-Stuy. Yeah. And so I think for me, looking back at Brooklyn, and after I've escaped it, I would say, like back then it was like you're looking at like you've been delivered out. You kind of made it out of New York, and you have a chance to live a better life, you know, so to speak. I just looked at New York and looked at Brooklyn as a place that was too rough to go back to, or even to take my family into. But at the same time, Brooklyn has changed a lot. Yeah. It's changed a lot. Still a lot of things happen in New York, but it has gotten a lot safer, I would say, than when it was when I was like Bed-Stuy is like a walk in the park now. I let my son walk around Bed-Stuy now. Cool. So it went from being a rough environment to now it's a little bit more peaceful. Okay. And, but God is still working. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've seen Him work a lot. Yeah. So tell us, fun question. What's your favorite thing about Brooklyn? Favorite thing about Brooklyn? Or top 3 if you have to list. I would say the honesty. I think Brooklyn people are very honest. Okay. Like, I would just say New Yorkers are very honest. And I think we get we get this, people think that we're very aggressive and rude.
Might have heard that.
Yeah, right. But we're just honest. And I think, so New York is so busy. People don't have time to dance around. Mm-hmm. So they just go straight to the point because they don't have time to play. So they're like, look, this is where I'm at. And even in church planting, know, you're like, you're telling people about your church, your vision casting. Yeah. And they'll tell you straight up, like, nah, I'm not coming, Wow. But, or they'll tell you, hey, I'll be there. And if they say they'll be there, New Yorkers are very loyal too. So I would say, the honesty and the loyalty. Yeah. That's just kind of embedded in the culture. Mm-hmm. People just kind of, when they with you, they with you. Yeah. Yeah.
So kind of going down that trail, you were talking about like when you talk to people about your church, or what is it like to talk to people in Brooklyn about God or their faith? What are those questions? I know you grew up there, but like how would it might be different from like sharing the gospel in Texas? I don't know if you're familiar, just I know you said your wife is from Alabama, so kind of that Southern mentality. But yeah, what is it like to share your faith with people in Brooklyn?
Sharing your faith in Brooklyn, you definitely can't come at people with a lot of do's and don'ts, If you're going to come at them with the gospel, you got to be the raw gospel. It has to be completely the grace of God, exposing them to God's love for them. I think that has been very effective for me, just having conversations and starting it straight out with like, man, God loves you. Yeah. And I don't know if you think that there's something you've done that may stand between you and a relationship with him, but he loves you. And I think that has I've had more success with that than just inviting people to church. Yeah. So that's one of the things, exposing people to the love of God. If you come at people in New York with a lot of do's and don'ts, they'll be turned off because they're already kind of like just doing their own thing. Yeah. And it's very worldly, very secular, I would say, compared to like, if you're talking about like the South and Texas and the Bible Belt, like
that's where we are. Yeah.
Down here. Yeah. We're not nowhere near that, So yeah. And I would say just building relationships, genuine relationships. I think sometimes you have to be patient and kind of shoot for the long game with people. Okay. And spend enough time with them, build enough relationships, build enough time, being a friend. Yeah. And then, like, for example, I invited two of my neighbors, the neighbor that lives above me, and then also my neighbor that lived next door. Okay. I invited them over to my house for Game 6 to watch the Warriors versus the Celtics. And, but I spent so much time being a neighbor. Yeah, right. Loving them and being a friend from, as a neighbor. So when I finally invited them into my home and then they found out like, oh, snap, I didn't know you were a pastor, Yeah. But by that time, I've already been like good.
You were already friends with them, yeah.
Yeah, and so now it's like they're a little bit more open to like what I have to say about Christianity.
Yeah, because they can trust you. You build that relationship.
Yeah. So being a friend.
That's great.
And not making it just about your church.
Right. Right. Yeah. Got a greater mission. Yeah. Loving people, reaching people with the gospel. That's awesome. Okay, let's go back to what it was like to navigate church planting, because I think the Borough Church also has a unique story of church planting. So what was that like for you? You're not just Chaz, you're a dad, you're a husband, you are a pastor, child of God. There's a lot about you that kind of goes into this journey of church planting, but you also planted at a unique time.
So, a unique time, what was that like? So just to fill everyone in, I planted with one of my best friends, Zach from Advertising, and we planted a church together, and it was a complete God thing. It was a good idea at first, but we actually found out that God really wanted this to work out. He wanted us to do this together. But it was like the moment we said yes and we merged, then the pandemic hit. And so here we are planting a church, and we were actually staying at a apartment building that was owned by the network we're a part of. Yeah. So, they kind of had rules and like, hey, no one can be there that's not like, family, Wow. If they don't live there, they can't be there. So now we can't even invite our core teams, to the little lounge area we used to meet at. Yeah. And So we had to do everything on Zoom.
Wow.
Zoom calls.
Launch a church on Zoom.
Yeah, we launched our church on Zoom. We would meet, twice a week.
Wow. And
again, New Yorkers are loyal. They were with us, and they would invite their friends in. And it was a time when people felt alone. A lot of churches were closing their doors, and it was hard for people to have like a social life and just community. So we created a space on Zoom where they can, have community and still walk, still grow in their faith.
Yeah.
And then eventually things opened up a little bit more, but it was still a challenge to like meet in a building.
Yeah.
So we would go outside in Prospect Park. we bought a bunch of lawn chairs and we set up and we would do our services in the park. And we started off with one guy just kind of playing the guitar.
Wow.
Then we got another guy to kind of play the cajon.
Right.
And we just kept building like that. And so that was the unique time. And but just in all of that, I'm making sure that I'm not, devoting, my family time to the church and making sure that my wife gets, weekly date nights and, my children have time with me and we, play games together and things like that. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And God, you're 3 years in, right? Yeah. The Lord continued to grow your numbers. But not only about growth, just the demographic of your church reflected your city, right? Yeah. Tell me about just the makeup of your church, people's backgrounds, together.
Yeah. So as you can see, I'm a black guy, right?
You are, yeah.
Zach is, he's a white guy. And I always share this because his name is Zach, Z-A-C-H. I'm C-H-A-Z, Chaz. And we're just like the backwards version of each other, right? The flip side of each other in a sense. And, Zach had, he had, I would say he had a diverse crew. He had more Hispanic and white, I think, with his crew. And then I had more black and I did have a Korean guy that was a part of our church. Yeah. So we kind of, when we merged from a place of diversity. Yeah. And we wasn't doing it because it was just, this is what it is,
it's just who you are.
It's who we are. And that has created, where anyone, a lot of Brooklyn can just come to our church and, just kind of find someone that they can, bridge right into the church with, you know? There's Korean, there's Chinese. We have like most of our youth are Chinese. Wow. One of our first deacons, a guy that we kind of have on a track and a pipeline to be a deacon. He's Korean. Okay. Our outreach coordinator is Puerto Rican. Okay. And it's just amazing how our, church is diverse, but it's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of maybe advantages or struggles that come with having a diverse church?
The struggles, so advantages, it would be, whenever we meet someone, there's someone that like, hey, I can connect this person with. Yeah. So like, there may be someone that I might have connected to, I might have met outside the church or in the street or whatever. But then like, once I kind of get them in, I'll connect them with someone else where there's more commonality with, just a similar background. So that's an advantage. Yeah. And I think, being a diverse church, some people just rather be in a diverse space, It's true. But then the disadvantages, some of the challenges is some people would rather be in a space where it's just people that look like them. And I've experienced that with even some of the black community where like they would rather just be in a black church. Yeah. And that's just some of the challenges that I come across. But, I think our church is like, we can't, reach everyone. Yeah. And we have to be okay with that. Some people are just going to be like, oh, it's too diverse for me, Wow. And then some people might look at your church and say, oh, this is perfect for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is maybe the biggest thing you've learned about God through this process of church planting?
Man, the biggest thing I've learned is to just pray, And I know it sounds so elementary, right?
You need God, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think when I say prayer, I mean it in so many different aspects, right? But like, Sometime even in staff, we've like jumped into staff without prayer. Just like, we're jumping in and we have like, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. And we come in with our strategy. And I think that we accomplish so much more and we see God work so much more when we just kind of come at it with like, Lord, we're just coming to you in prayer.
Yeah.
And we're asking you to work and for you to move. So that aspect of prayer, praying over people, praying over the people that I'm trying to reach.
Yeah.
Like this, it's funny because sometimes I'll have someone like really interested in the church and something will happen. And it won't be an excuse of them just not wanting to come.
Yeah.
They'll lose their phone or something happens and then like, I'll see them and like, yeah, they got a new phone. They did lose their phone.
Yeah.
And they just didn't have the address. And so there's warfare, there's things that's happening to keep them from.
Right.
And I have to like, if I'm reaching them and I'm like, I see that they're open to the gospel, I got to remember that the enemy is fighting them as well.
Yeah.
And just prayer about that. Yeah. Praying over them about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Prayer, just an aspect like, we are doing something I truly believe that God is like totally in.
Yeah.
This is what he wanted. This is, he's in it. He's for it. But, and sometimes we have like little loopholes or different things that we're missing. Yeah. That we need in a church. Like, we needed a worship leader. We needed a graphic person. We needed a, someone to help with the AV stuff. And sometimes we'll be sitting there like, man, we don't have it. We don't have it. Pray, And like when we pray, God he provides it. Sometimes it's right in the house. And this person will be like, oh yeah, I've done that before. Like I did that. Like I have a degree. Like you had a degree in this? And it's like, oh my God. And so, or sometimes it'll be someone who, who didn't want to do it. They didn't want to step up to the plate and serve in that area. But through prayer, they're just like, hey, I just feel like God wants me to help you guys in this. And like, yes. Or God will send someone through the door and they'll come in and then, they help us out. So prayer in every sense of it, Like that's been the biggest thing is, am I becoming more prayerful? Yeah. And just becoming more prayerful and all of that.
Yeah. So maybe also tell us a little bit more about just the values that your church has. So prayer is obviously one of those. I mean, it's in your DNA to pray as a church, pray together, pray for other people. You're seeing the Lord move. What are some other values that the Borough Church has?
I would say it's family and community. One thing about our church is even though we're so diverse, there's like this family like culture that we have. Cool. It's like our value. It's like it's webbed in our DNA. That's probably the main word we use from the pulpit. It's family and community. Yeah. And so we do cookouts together. We eat together. Cool. They hang out. Sometimes they hang out and they don't want the pastors around. And they do stuff together. Game nights. Yeah. And so even though we're a church plant, we're small enough where people could just do life together. Yeah. And that's like a huge thing for us. People just come in and like, man, this is family for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I think you and Zach probably model that too. Like it didn't just happen. You guys were strategic about it, the way that you guys love each other, your families love each other. Right. It's just become a part of who your church is. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Talk a little bit about how you and Zach reach your city. I mean, Brooklyn, I don't know if you know the population or the borough where you're at. Maybe share that information. I don't know if you know what it is. And then tell us how you reach your city.
Okay. So we kind of like, we look at who God is bringing us and we don't try to reinvent the wheel almost. Yeah. So like, for example, we have a guy in our church. He works at a nursing home. He's like the chaplain of a nursing home. We have another guy who he works at the Bowery Mission, which is like a shelter in Manhattan. We have another guy who we call like, he's like the mayor of Sunset Park. He can like, you can give him a whistle and a Facebook post and he can have 100 kids in the park. And like, these are like, this is our church. This is like, so like, We don't try to like, all right, we have these people, but let's try to reach people in another way. It's like, no, we have a chaplain, you know, we have someone who works at the shelter. We have someone who is excellent at doing basketball tournaments.
Yeah.
And we just use what we have. Yeah. You know, we use the people and the gifts, and we use like who God has already given us. Yeah. Because who God has given us, like, I guess he wants to use those people. And so like who we have, who God has sent us, we kind of send them right back. And then we go with them, you know? And so we reach our city like that. Yeah. So that's why, you know, a lot of people look at our church and they're like, man, you got a lot of tall guys in your church. They all play basketball, you know? Most of them play basketball. And so, you know, I want to brag on Zach, but Zach is really good in basketball, you know? Yeah. Amazing jump shot. And we have people in our church because his jump shot was good. Wow. You know? And so like there's a guy in our church, he's like, yo, man, Zach was kind of telling me about his church and I wasn't really taking him serious. But man, when he started playing, I was like, maybe he is professional, you know? You know, maybe, stuff like that. I think we reach our city with the gifts that God has already given us. Yeah. Another thing, you know, we make sure like we teach our people to like, you know, make friends, be friendly, be kind, you know, have coffee, have dinner, go into people's homes. And I think about how when Jesus sent out his people, when he sent out you know, sent them out 2 by 2, he would tell them like, hey, go in people's homes. Matter of fact, he told them, don't even take anything with you. Yeah. Like they're gonna provide for you. They're gonna look like you're gonna be provided for as you're on the journey. But I think that taught them to kind of be relational. Yeah. You know, because in order for them to eat, they had to like actually go in people's homes and eat with them. Yeah. And so I think that, you know, spreading the gospel, so much of the gospel is like, it's relational work, you know, and spending time, inviting people into your home. Yeah. And, you know, it's easy to get on social media and type scriptures and things like that. And, you know, I do some of that stuff too, but having conversation over dinner. Yeah. And going in people's homes and going in coffee shops and really just talking. Yeah. We reach our cities in ways like that too. Yeah. Just being friendly. And I know we might have people listening that are like introverts, you know? I mean, I know you and Zach are super friendly. I mean, your wife, I met her. She's so nice, so friendly. Right. But do you have people in your church who would say, no, I'm an introvert. I can't go meet people. Like I'm not friendly. How do you walk with them? So that's really, it's a really good question. Cause I did have someone in our church. He was like, yo man, I'm an introvert. And so I kind of helped him to kind of diagnose it a little bit and kind of like, kind of unpack what it means to be an introvert. Because to some extent, I'm an introvert, right? I'm an extrovert. I think I'm both. You probably, I'm probably both. You're on the line. Yeah. I'm extrovert, but I'm also like, I like to be alone too. Yeah. I recharge alone, and I also, you know, recharge with people. I can't have too much of either. And so sometimes I think some people I think will say, oh, I'm introvert, but I think it's really they need like some social muscles built up. Yeah. You know? So they may be introvert, right? They may be introvert and they may recharge alone. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't have a social life. You know? And I think I try to help people like, hey, even though you're introvert, it's okay to be introvert. It's okay to stay at home and read books and just chill. It's okay. But you want to kind of like have a social life as well. And a lot of them, they would say, yeah, I desire to have a social life. Right. And so what does that mean when it's time to have a social life and you're like, you got to build it up. It's like a muscle, you know, it's like getting back in the gym and you hadn't been in a while. You know, you kind of feel a little out of place, a little awkward. Yeah. And you're looking around and at other people who are like, you know, on you, like, man, am I even doing this right? But you just keep working at it. And you can have a social life, you can build up that muscle and still be introvert. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So So you help just walk alongside everybody in your church, helping to train, equip them, to show them just how to live like Jesus. That's really cool. You guys are modeling it. Yeah. Matter of fact, you guys sent a team to Brooklyn to help us with our baptism a few weeks ago. And while we were at the beach, there was a Chinese couple. They saw our tents up and they just came and sat down. Cool. So because our church is so diverse, I never know like who's going to show up. So I thought that they were invited by someone. And when I came over and spoke to them, they were like, no, we're just getting some of the shade that you guys put up. So I went to two of the guys in our church and I asked them to go over and just talk with them. One I would say is an introvert. The other one is more of an extrovert. Yeah. But they were eager to do it together. And of course, the extrovert one did most of the talking. Yeah. But the introvert one was excited to be right there alongside him and help him out. Yeah. You know, so it was cool.
So you talked about having this baptism celebration. You talked about a basketball camp. Yeah. What are there some things, maybe events that you do, or like maybe bigger outreach times? And then if you want to tell us just some stories about your basketball camp or baptism celebration and things like that.
So we did a basketball tournament, and we do a lot of tournaments. That's like cool. Like that's like our main outreach. We've even like thought about this. It's a guy in our church who we're probably gonna make him another deacon in our church. But it's the simple fact that he can really serve in like the basketball tournament. He can run it while me and Zach can like just be relational and just kind of catch up with people. Yeah. And just do the pastoring thing. So basketball tournaments is like a big thing for us. Cool. We got the guy, you know, in our church who can go out and get 100 kids to the park and all we got to do is like kind of feed them, share the gospel with them. You know, we'll get them to sit around in a circle. Yeah. We'll do a gospel presentation. And then like some of the kids will come up to us and they want follow up. You know, they want us to kind of keep in touch with them and, hey, where's your church at? And stuff like that. So basketball tournaments are a huge hit for us in the context that we're in. The baptism, we usually do that at the beach. We do one at the beach and we usually do one at the, we do like a fall retreat. Okay. And like we'll know if we get one with like a pool, we'll do a baptism there at the fall retreat. And so this recently though, we baptized a guy who he kind of came up in a 7-day Adventist background. Yeah. He's has a Jamaican background. And he found us online and he found us from Instagram and he came into our church. And because he had that 7-day Adventist background, and there's no shade to that, but he said he just never heard the gospel. Wow, yeah. So during the pandemic, he actually sat down with the scriptures and studied it for himself. Wow. And he came across the gospel. He's like, I never saw this. I never knew this. And, you know, it took hold of his heart. And, you know, as he's growing and walking with the Spirit, he's like, yo, I think it's time for me to get a church, you know, to be a part of a church. And he went searching and he ended up finding us from Instagram. And like you was asking earlier, like for him, diversity was a huge hit. Yeah. And so he came in and then, you know, he was like, yo, man, I've never been baptized. I want to get baptized. And so we baptized him at the beach. Yeah. That's awesome.
Tell us maybe just a couple more stories of just ways that you've seen the Lord move, just stories of victory or God coming through. You guys said you pray a lot. You know, I'm sure God answers some of your prayers. So.
We pray a lot, and like it's becoming a thing now where our people are like, yo, when the Borough Church prays, God moves, you know? Amen. Like they start saying this stuff now. It's becoming like a part of our culture. But one cool story. So we have a partner in San Antonio, Community Bible Church. And there was a guy who came to our church from there. Yeah. He's deaf. So he came to our church. He hit us up on Instagram, right? Hey. He hit us up on Instagram again. So he's communicating. He's like, yo, I want to come check the church out. And he had saw that they posted about us. And they kind of did a trip and they posted about us. And so he's like, oh, I'm in Brooklyn now. Let me go check the church out. So he came and found out that he was deaf. He asked us, did we have any translator or anything? So we're like, no, we don't have it. But you know what? We could pray.
We could pray.
You know, this is what we do. That's awesome. So we're like, yeah, we're going to pray about it. And so we kept in contact with him. And so Zach and I, we prayed that God would send us a translator. So Zach is on a date with Caroline, his wife. And while they're on a date, he runs into this guy and they were sitting next to him at the movie theater. It was one of those movie theaters you can kind of eat. Yeah. So they were sitting next to each other. And Zach felt it on his heart that he needed to talk to the guy. And the guy felt the same thing. So they end up meeting outside and they talk. And Zach was like, hey, man, I just want to tell you about my church. You know, I don't know if you're interested, but the Borough Church, come check it out. And he's like, yo, man, I just really felt that I needed to talk with you. And come to find out, this guy is a translator.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so he comes now he's a part of our church.
Yeah.
And now the guy who is deaf, they've linked up.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those things. It was just, I teared up one day when we actually got both of them at the church together. The first Sunday that they were both there together and he was translating for him. I sat in the back and, I just kind of teared up.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is literally like a thought. And this is something that we just was praying about. It wasn't a reality yet.
Yeah.
And then like God just put it together. And it was just so amazing to watch it. And so,
and
now the guy who's deaf, he wants to like get, get acclimated with like some of our worship songs.
Yeah. Because
he wants to kind of, do sign language for the songs.
Oh my gosh.
And so, so God's worked in that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, God's just building your church to look like heaven. I mean, it's just, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's really cool. Yeah. There may be people watching, listening who feel a call to church plant and maybe wrestling with it.
Yeah.
What encouragement or what would you want to say to them?
Wow. It's going to be tough. There will be challenges. But if God is calling you to it, like he'll be with you.
Yeah.
And it's something I preached on is like, if God is calling you to something, I know what it's like to feel and sense God's calling and kind of see the confirmations, but still be reluctant. And it's not fulfilling, when you're kind of running from that call. But if God is calling you to it, he'll have your back. It doesn't mean you won't have any challenges. It doesn't mean that you won't have any frustrations or anything like that. But if he's calling you to it, he'll definitely like support you.
Yeah.
And he'll be there for you. And like, honestly, for me, like I shared some of my background and, coming from a rough neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York to kind of having a decent living with my wife in Virginia to stepping out in faith. And like, I would be honest and say like, this has been the most rewarding decision I ever made in my life. I mean, there's Christ, there's getting married, and there's your children. And then right under that, there's church planting for me. It's like the most rewarding decision I have ever made in my life in the last 3 years. And I would, I can say too, like there are things that I was pursuing that God was just calling me in a different direction. Yeah. And I was pursuing these things and trying to make that like the totality of my life, trying to build my life around those things. But when I just submitted to God's call and his leadership, and he's made those other areas better, but my priority is his calling.
Yeah.
And so like my business has grown.
Yeah.
And maybe if it would have grown, before the calling, before me actually stepping into my call, I probably would have been like, I'm not doing that.
No.
I'm good over here.
Yeah.
And so God didn't allow it to go but so far. But once I, got focused on what he wanted me to do and he was calling me to do, he made the other things kind of flourish in its own way.
Yeah.
And so, there's a blessing, there's a reward, and there's a special reward and walk with God and fellowship with him when you're just obeying him and his calling. So
yeah, you said something. I was there, whenever you were preaching at South Oaks campus, and I was blessed by it. I was like taking all these kind of notes. You said something where you said submitting to God doesn't mean you won't have doubts. You'll have opportunities to be dependent. And I just see that in your life. Like you are dependent on him through prayer. Yeah. And you're saying it's worth it. Like he's so good.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you don't just preach it. Like we're sitting here having a conversation being like, I'm just going to depend on him because he's so good.
He's so good. He's so good. Awesome. Me and Zach always have this thing like, yo, we really rocking with the best. Like we're talking about the Lord.
Yeah.
We are rocking with the best,
That's so good.
Yeah.
I guess on the flip side of that question, I asked, there may be people watching, listening who are like, I'm not going near church planting. God's not calling me into that. But I mean, we're all called to share the gospel. Yeah. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations. And so how would you encourage somebody who says, I'm not called to church plant, but I don't know, reach your neighborhood, reach your community, reach your workplace. What would you say to them? Yeah.
I would say, just give what you have, share the light that you have, share the news that you have. And it still goes back to like being relational. I was talking to a friend, and he just has a huge heart. And he even told me that he does feel like God is calling him to plant a church. Yeah. But he just doesn't feel like it's right now. Okay. Right. So for him, it's like, it's not even right now. So, he went back into, to his job or whatever. But I was thinking like, man, even if that's the case and you don't feel like God is calling you, or you don't feel like God's calling you now, like, I'm like, man, bro, you have a huge heart. Like, just give that away. Like, meet with guys and he may see this, but like, he's a barber, he's cutting hair, and he has a community of guys. Because he was cutting his hair, but he kind of, stepped away from that to kind of go back and get a job and, make some more money for his family, which I totally understand. But I'm like, man, you got these guys that you have built a, relationship with and you have loved on, man, keep that going, even if you have to go back and, get a job, like keep that love, keep that heart going, and keep sharing that light and that love that you have. You have a huge heart. And I would say that, even if you feel like, church planting isn't it for you, or it's not right now, whatever, like you still have something that you can give, especially if you're like, you're ingrained in community. Yeah. You're gaining something from community, share that with someone else, That's good. Yeah.
No, that's really good. I know in the church, we talk a lot about calling. You hinted on it earlier, but how does somebody know if God is calling them to this?
Yeah, I would say when you feel like it's like, if I don't do it, I'm in disobedience, That's good. So for me, it was like, it's like, I wanted to go, like, I wanted to get a house near Atlanta, like right outside of Atlanta. Like, like for me, that was cool. And most people say, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, man, my wife's hometown is like 4 hours from Atlanta. Okay. That's what I wanted to do. But I felt like it was just disobedience. I'm from Brooklyn. My whole family were like, man, it's no way. Why would you want to go back to Brooklyn? Why would you want to go back to New York? Yeah. You know how expensive it is? You know how much it costs? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm not doing this because this is some kind of bright idea. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, planting in New York. That's great.
That's great.
No, I don't want to go. I don't think this is
right. Yeah.
But I felt like I would be in disobedience if I didn't do it. Yeah. And I think that, God has a way of calling us, and it's in various ways. Yeah. He can speak to us. Right. For me, he spoke to me through people, through dreams. Yeah. Just in my heart, just through his spirit. Yeah. Through study. And he made it clear. And it was a thing that I just had to say yes to. Yeah. And saying not yet, and no, and pushing it back. Yeah. Felt like disobedience,
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, we heard you say it was the best decision you've ever made. Yeah. Just encouraging people to step into their calling.
Yeah. Step into your calling. Yeah. Like it's so unfulfilling outside of it. Yeah. And you may experience a little success and a little this and that, but like, this is amazing. Yeah. I would say I'm on a joyride with God. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, I've loved this conversation, Chaz. Yeah. Where can people connect with you, connect with the Borough? Yeah. Let people know.
I would say probably the main place is probably Instagram. Okay. So you could find us on Instagram, search the Borough Church. Okay. On Instagram, or you can find me on Instagram as well. My name is Chaz Hofler. Yeah.
And on Apple Music,
Apple Music, you can search me. You can search me out, Chaz Hofler. You can find all my music, some of the old stuff, some of the stuff I released last year. Cool. And you'll see some more features and things like that.
That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Well, we'll link all of that in the show notes. Thanks again for being here. Yeah. Hope you and your family have a wonderful time in Texas and safe travels back. But join us next week. We will have one more church planter on the podcast to close out our church planting series. So until then, we'll see you next week.
Amen.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Let us know if you have any questions or feedback from today's episode by going to fielder.org/podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, just leave a comment below. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review. That helps this message reach more people in our community, because it's our hope this podcast will equip you and many others to live as a follower of Christ outside the walls of the church.